Well, good afternoon. Thanks for being here. And our colleague, Senator Coons, I believe, is going to be joining us shortly. But a lot of important work and things happening right now related to this topic. So we want to go ahead and get started. We're here today to speak about the urgent need for the Senate to come together to address both our national security and the threats to our allies and, frankly, people all around the world. We'll be voting this afternoon on one of the most consequential combination of issues we may ever face as members of Congress. It's not a game. It's not about politics. And we, as Democrats, are ready to meet Republicans halfway. This afternoon, the Senate will consider a security supplemental. Leader Schumer has made a serious and historic offer to our Republican colleagues. They will be able to write and put forward the First Amendment to this bill to address their border security concerns. Now, this is a real opportunity to come together. It, of course, would require 60 votes, but it would provide them the opportunity to put forward the amendment on the issue that they now say they are most concerned about and feel strongest about in terms of this package. So Leader Schumer is giving them the opportunity to offer an amendment of their own, and think about this. Offer an amendment that will only take 10 Democrats to join them. Not our whole caucus, not half our caucus. 10 Democrats joining with them on their amendment. So why is Senator Schumer willing to make this agreement? Because this legislation is critical to our own national security and the security of democracies around the world. We are more than ready to address problems at our border. In fact, we want to do it. We've been trying to get bipartisan support to do it. Our supplemental does just that. It supports an additional 1,300 Border Patrol agents, 1,600 asylum officers, so asylum proceedings can move faster and those who are ineligible for asylum can be quickly returned. It includes funding to deploy 100 cutting-edge inspection machines to help detect fentanyl at the ports of entry, where most fentanyl is smuggled into the United States. It funds an additional 1,000 law enforcement agents to disrupt drug cartels moving fentanyl into the country. It includes the bipartisan Fend Off Fentanyl Act, which came out of committee unanimously, which targets and sanctions drug traffickers. And it improves border management with new temporary holding facilities, support for local governments, and at the same time, it protects vulnerable migrant children. Every member of this chamber knows the stakes here. Everybody knows. We need to defend Ukraine against Russia's illegal and violent invasion. We need to support our ally Israel in the aftermath of the horrific terrorist attacks. We need to ensure that humanitarian aid reaches innocent civilians in Gaza, as well as those around the world who are in deep, deep hunger. And we need to address our own border security. Democrats are ready to do all of this, and it's critical that Republicans join us. Senator Shaheen. Sorry.
Thank you, Senator Stabenow. I am here also to join Senator Stabenow, Coons, and Schatz in urging our Republican colleagues to join us in addressing the supplemental national security package. And I'm going to focus my comments on the border because that's really the sticking point at this juncture. And I want to start with the fentanyl piece of what I think is important about this package. In 2022, we lost over 73,000 Americans from fentanyl-related deaths, overdose deaths. In my state of New Hampshire, fatal drug overdoses are increasing faster than the rest of the country, and 80% of those involved fentanyl. You know, what we heard a couple of weeks ago at the APEC summit in San Francisco was that President Xi and President Biden came to an agreement that addressed precursor chemicals for fentanyl. I met with the DEA Administrator Milgram on Thursday, and one of the things she talked about was the opportunity we have as the result of that to really address the fentanyl crisis in the United States. But in order to do that, we need the technology that's in this legislation to detect fentanyl that's coming across our southern border overwhelmingly at the points of entry. That's what's in this legislation. Now, there are other provisions around policy about who gets into the United States at our southern border, and I think as Democrats, we're willing to talk about that. We're willing to look at whatever amendment our Republican colleagues might come up with that could help address other issues at the southern border. But the reality is failing to pass a national security package at this point that fails to fund Ukraine, fails to provide support for Israel, that doesn't address the humanitarian situation, is just going to embolden our adversaries. Putin, Iran, the Chinese Communist Party, North Korea, all of those who want to take down the United States. So we're willing to work across the aisle. I hope what we're going to see from our Republican colleagues is a willingness to do the same. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Senator Shaheen. Senator Coons.
Thank you, Senator Stabenow, Senator Shaheen. Time is running out. We have but a few days for us to make clear, positive progress towards working out the final details necessary for us to show that the United States is a reliable ally, that the coalition of 50 countries from around the world that President Biden has pulled together and that Congress on a bipartisan basis has sustained is going to have the resources needed for Ukraine to continue to fight through the winter into next year and to ultimately successfully push back Russia's immoral, brutal, illegal invasion. We need to make investments in the Indo-Pacific, in the security strategy that we all support and that we know is critical to push back on Chinese aggression in the South China Sea and the region. We need to make critical investments in combating fentanyl smuggling, as we just heard from Senator Shaheen. And there's one other piece of this package I wanted to highlight, $1 billion for the nonprofit security grant program to help ensure that houses of worship across our country, whether synagogues or mosques, churches, or other places of gathering, are secure. This supplemental includes absolutely critical provisions, not least of which is $10 billion in humanitarian assistance that will save from hunger or starvation millions of people across dozens of countries. But at this point, we are hung up on the lack of a clear agreement on how to deal with our southern border. President Biden, in the supplemental request sent us, included $13.6 billion, which would be the single biggest one-year investment in border security in American history. You heard Senator Stabenow detail how it would include 1,300 new Border Patrol agents, 1,600 new asylum officers and teams. I could go into more detail, but let me give you a comparison. The last big bipartisan border security and immigration package, the Rounds-King bill, proposed $2.5 billion a year. This is $13.6 billion across every imaginable element of border security. Well, our Republican friends have said that's not enough. There needs to be changes in border policy. The window of opportunity here that Senator Schumer, our leader, has announced to give the First Amendment vote to whoever can come forward with a proposal that gets 60 votes is the moment for Republicans to put up or shut up. If we cannot come together and craft that amendment, if we cannot come to a vote that sustains our allies and partners in Ukraine, we will have failed this moment in history. Israel is struggling to recover from a brutal attack from Hamas terrorists, is conducting a war in Gaza, and also needs and deserves our support. Humanitarian support, support in the Indo-Pacific, support for Israel, support for combating fentanyl, support for Ukraine. All of this must pass before the end of this year. And we now have the vehicle, the timing, and the process by which Republicans and Democrats can come up with a package that will pass and allow us to do our job. I only pray that we will. Senator Schatz.
Senator Schatz.
Thank you, Senator Coons. Look, this is pretty simple. We have colleagues who say they are for stopping Putin, and they should vote for the supplemental to help Ukraine. You can't say, I'm for Ukraine, but only if I get this wholly unrelated policy enacted. You can't be for stopping Putin from taking over a country by force and then vote against providing Ukraine the resources to do just that. You are either for the thing that you say you are for, or you're not. It is that simple. If you are serious about legislating on the border, Democrats have been working in good faith throughout this process. We've been willing and eager to engage in bipartisan border proposals, and Leader Schumer has offered an amendment vote on this. There's an opportunity to legislate here, bring forward a serious proposal that gets 60 votes. But no such proposal exists as of right now. So the question really is, should we vote to proceed? Should we begin debate on this bill? Not passing it yet, just begin debating it. Or should we block it because you don't have a border proposal in final form? All of the members, we got complainers on both sides, but there were a lot of complaints about a lack of an open amendment process, that the Senate floor should be the Senate floor. Move to proceed. Move to proceed. We're not asking you to vote for the final package. We don't have the final package. That's what the First Amendment slot is for. But what they are doing is blocking us from even starting. The choice here is very clear. If you are for Ukraine, if you want to stop Putin, you can't do that in secret. You have to vote accordingly and do it today.
Thank you. As we open up to questions, let me just reiterate the fact that this is one of the most consequential votes we will ever take in terms of what this means in sending a message to Russia and to China and to Iran, to our allies who have stood with us and put in the majority of dollars for Ukraine. This is so consequential on every kind of level, including, as Senator Shaheen talked about, the number of people who've lost their lives because of fentanyl addiction. This is huge. So there's no reason that we should not be moving ahead to be able to get to the bill. This is all about, are we going to debate the bill? Are we going to proceed to the bill? And in my mind, there's only two possible reasons that Republicans would not take Senator Schumer up on his historic offer. One, their proposal is so extreme that they can't get 10 Democrats to join them. Or this is all a game because they don't want to fund Ukraine. And this is the way they're trying to stop it. And frankly, this would give the biggest Christmas present to Putin you could possibly imagine. And that would be outrageous. Happy to take questions. Yes?
So you're willing to meet Republicans halfway. Can you give any evidence of concessions you've made to do that?
There are a number of things that have gone on in negotiations for the last 3 weeks. There are some who said there were no negotiations going on, but we have a lot of colleagues spending a lot of time on supposedly no negotiations. And I would just say in the areas of asylum and parole, and there's a number of areas, I wouldn't get into specifics, but to say that there were a number of things that certainly were put on the table that would garner 10 Democrats, for sure. And so, but unfortunately, it feels like every time something was put on the table, then the goalposts were moved. And the one thing that we will not do is support H.R. 2, which basically would close the border of the United States. And not only the economic impact of that would be outrageous, as well as the other impacts. Yes?
What's your sense of the time frame? Like, what if this does lapse into January? You're talking about this is a great moment, a historic moment. How long is the moment?
Well, this is the question. The clock is ticking, and welcome my colleagues to address this as well. But the truth is that every day we go past the end of the year, every day we're into the Ukrainian winter, every day we're into the Ukrainian winter, every opportunity we give Putin to go after their electrical grids and do the other things that will devastate people in Ukraine is a moment too long. And so, and the same is true, we could go through every single part of the bill, every single part of the bill. And so we will do what we always do as Democrats. We will work hard. We believe in governing. We believe in being bipartisan. And we will work to find the reasonable middle that gets us where we need to go. And I think we'll just keep at it because it's too important.
OMB Director Shalonda Young sent a letter to the entire Senate being very clear about how little time is left. Our aid to Ukraine has 3 different components. One is the direct transfer of military equipment and hardware. Second is budget support that helps the operations of government in Ukraine, like first responders coming to the site of a Russian missile attack where there's a fire and devastation. And then the third is humanitarian assistance that helps to feed the millions of Ukrainians who are displaced internally and helps with sustaining support and community for those who are refugees. We're largely out of money and almost completely out of time in all 3 of those. Last, the urgent factor here is we've got 50 other countries who in combination have contributed more than we have. Their support will also begin to wane if we give them the excuse. If the Americans aren't coming in several other European countries, the debates within their countries and their capitals will become sharper about how long can we sustain our support for Ukraine.
Yes, sir. Okay.
Today, the Department of Justice announced indictments for 4 Russians for war crimes. Do you think that the timing is coincidental here? And what is alleged in that indictment is incredibly brutal and disturbing against an American. Do you think that adds a sense of urgency and sort of a reminder of the brutality to those who are not voting for this?
Well, let me speak briefly again, any kind that wants to, but what we see is a Biden administration that is working on all fronts all the time. An incredible Justice Department and national security team, as well as domestic team, making it clear that people will be held accountable for that brutality. And we're seeing a number of things happening today. We right now have the Secretary of the Treasury who's making an announcement on fentanyl activities. She's in Mexico and she's making an announcement. There is a whole team on every front that is pushing on all of these pieces, and certainly as it relates to Ukraine, the brutality and so on, I support what the president's doing.
The answer to that is yes. It should add urgency. It should add urgency to anybody who's thinking about whether or not they're going to vote for this bill. There has been a bipartisan effort in the Senate to try and hold Russia accountable for war crimes. This is a first step in that, and we need to pass the supplemental so we continue to make sure that Putin is held accountable and that the Ukrainians are able to ultimately be successful in this effort.
Thank you.
And
Yes.
sorry, do you think
Yes.
the timing is coincidental?
Yes,
Yes.
Department of Justice does what they
No,
do.
yes. Yes.
Thanks so much. Are any of you concerned about the cloture vote this afternoon failing? And if it were to go down, what does that mean for the status of this package overall and its ability to pass?
Well, I think we're all concerned about the possibility of it going down. That's why we're here. That's why we've been talking to all of our colleagues. There needs to be an incredible sense of urgency. As Senator Coons said, we've heard from our OMB director. We heard yesterday from defense leaders and so on. Ukraine is just about out of time here in terms of the resources that they have. And certainly all of these things are important. We're not saying this, but right now, the great sense of urgency is with Ukraine. And so we hope Republicans will understand the historic opportunity that this leader, that Senator Schumer has given them. As I said, he's not asking that he approve their language, that our whole caucus support it, or even half our caucus support it. It's really quite extraordinary. And if they can't come up with a proposal that is reasonable enough that they can get 10 Democrats, then they ought to pull back, let's go on and negotiate that piece and let the rest of it go through.
This is a moment where each caucus is sending a signal to the other. Many Republicans have said to me, we have to have a failed vote so we're serious about demanding a change in border policy. We also think that a failed vote sends a very serious signal to Ukraine, to China, to Hamas, to many, to Iran, that we are not making the progress we have to in providing urgently needed support to our partners and allies. Senator Schumer has offered a structure where instead of having a series of floor speeches and failed cloture votes, we can get on this bill, and there is a clear path towards putting on the floor and passing a reasonable bipartisan compromise on border.
Yes.
During your negotiations, have you been cognizant that even though there's a Democratic majority in the Senate and getting it through, it might be a tougher sell in the House, and trying to work that into your negotiations, or would you just wait and see how they respond?
That's certainly a part of everything. In fact, Senator Schumer said yesterday at our stakeout that that the Speaker of the House had called him at the end of last week, indicating he couldn't move something without H.R. 2 in it. Senator Schumer indicated that is a non-starter. There's no way that we would support essentially closing the border of the United States. And they certainly wouldn't get any Democratic votes in the House. And so that's very much a part of the equation in terms of finding, again, that middle ground. But I would think if there are 60 members of the United States Senate that come together on an amendment, that there would be a lot of momentum then to have that pass the House. Yes.
Senator Cornyn and some of your Republican colleagues have said, let this cloture vote go down. That will send a message that it is time to start talking about border again. Maybe that will draw things loose. What do you make of that?
Well, I guess what I would say is we're running out of time, and what is the message they're sending to Ukraine? What is the message they're sending to Putin? What is the message they're sending to Xi and China? What's the message they're sending to Iran and Hamas? And the list goes on and on. I mean, we're up against a clock right now. If they're talking about a failed vote and coming back right away, that's one thing. But if this just becomes sort of politics as usual, we are going to see some serious consequences for our own security and for what's happening around the world.
If I may follow
Jean,
up.
do you want to? Did you
Go
want to
ahead,
respond?
follow up.
Are you all confident that Republicans want to make a deal on the border?
If they, here's the thing, I will tell you that if they want a deal on border, they will take Senator Schumer's deal. If they don't want a deal on border, then they will just continue whatever the politics, whatever the game, whatever is happening here. Senator Schumer has given them more than enough time and the right people in the room from our caucus that want to get to an agreement, that are working hard for weeks and weeks. And so this is their moment. The question is, ask them. Do they want a deal on the border or not? Or is this just about standing with Putin and taking away any support for Ukraine?
Republican leader McConnell said yesterday, I think I can repeat this because he has said it publicly,
Yeah.
that no one is a stronger supporter of Ukraine in their fight against Russia than he is. That's been echoed by others in Republican leadership. I think the Republican caucus has convinced themselves they have unlimited leverage in this moment to secure significant changes in policy on the border in a direction that the House majority and the former president want. We've already heard repeatedly from former President Trump extreme proposals, restoring the Muslim ban, using the National Guard to deport people from the interior of the United States. In the spectrum from the proposal that came up from the president to fund border security to the other extreme, there is a window here for us to find bipartisanship, common ground, and to make reasonable progress. Republicans will realize if they don't take this avenue that they have limited leverage here because of time and because of a shared commitment to defending Ukraine. We need to take this opportunity in this moment to put balanced bipartisan proposals for border security on the floor. That's what the Senate is supposed to be best at. First thing this morning, I got an alarmed text from a Ukrainian legislator I've become close with saying, God, are you really going to abandon us? The problem is that the whole world is watching. And as we try to engage in these subtle signaling exercises, we're running out of time and we're sending the wrong messages. It's time for my Republican colleagues and friends to embrace this moment and opportunity and accept a positive, bipartisan, limited proposal on border security policy.
And with that, we need to close. There's a vote going on. So thank you very much. So.